I remember exactly how the turkey smelled that night. And I remember exactly how quiet the table went when my son said it. Ben was 22, home from college, still wearing the sweater I'd bought him. He set his phone down like he was closing a business meeting and said, "Mom's moving to a home. We already talked to a place in Fairview. It's decided." He called his grandmother Mom. He always had since he was small because his father did it first and the habit just stuck. So when he said it, everyone at that table knew exactly who he meant. Eleanor. My mother-in-law. The woman who had lived with us for 8 years, who had taught Ben to bake bread, who had sat beside my hospital bed the week I lost a pregnancy and never once left. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't drop my fork dramatically either. I set it down quietly the way you set something down when you need both hands free. And I said, "Let's talk about whose home that would be." Nobody answered me right away. My husband, Daniel, looked at his sister Vanessa. Vanessa looked at her plate. And in that silence, I understood that this had been decided long before dinner. I just hadn't been in the room when it happened. To understand that moment, you have to go back about 3 months to the small things. Because betrayal, in my experience, never announces itself. It arrives in pieces so small you almost apologize to yourself for noticing them. The first piece was an envelope. A law office in town, addressed only to Daniel, marked personal. I didn't open it. I just remembered the name on the return address because it wasn't our family attorney. It was an elder law firm. The second piece was a phone call I wasn't meant to hear. Daniel in the garage, voice low, saying, "She doesn't need to know yet. Let's just get the paperwork moving first." I stood on the other side of the door for a long moment before I walked away. I told myself it could be anything. I didn't yet let myself ask why my stomach had gone cold. The third piece was Eleanor herself. She'd started seeming foggier, forgetting names she'd known for years, losing her train of thought mid-sentence. I noticed her pill organizer had changed. A new medication, one I didn't recognize, that Daniel said, the doctor recommended. When I asked which doctor, he said, "Just a doctor, Claire. Don't make this complicated." That word, complicated, was the one that finally moved me from noticing to investigating. I didn't confront him. I want to be honest about that because I think a lot of women believe strength means yelling the loudest in the room. I don't believe that. I believe strength is quiet, and it does its work before anyone else knows it's begun. So on a Tuesday, while Daniel was at work and Eleanor was napping, I drove to the county recorder's office. I asked for a copy of the deed to the house we all lived in, the house Eleanor's late husband had built, the house everyone in the family assumed would one day belong to Daniel, because that's how these things usually go. The clerk printed it out and slid it across the counter, and I read it twice to make sure I wasn't imagining it. The house was in my name. Not Daniel's. Not Eleanor's. Mine. I sat in my car in that parking lot for a long time. I remembered then a conversation from 6 years earlier, a quiet afternoon when Eleanor had asked me to sign some papers for insurance purposes. She'd said. I hadn't thought much of it since. I had no idea what I'd actually signed. I called our family's actual attorney, not the elder law firm Daniel had contacted, and I asked him carefully, without explaining why, what a quitclaim deed like that would mean. He told me plainly. The house had been transferred to me fully years ago. Eleanor had done it deliberately. That's when I finally went to her. Not Daniel. Her. I sat on the edge of her bed and I asked her gently why she'd never told me. She looked at me for a long moment, and her eyes were sharper than they'd been in weeks, sharper than the fog Daniel's new pills had been giving her. She said, "Because I knew one day I'd need someone who couldn't be talked out of protecting me." She told me the rest slowly, piece by piece, the way I'd learned everything else. Daniel's business, the consulting firm he'd poured money into for 3 years, was failing. Worse than failing. There was a lawsuit coming. From an investor who claimed Daniel had misrepresented the company's finances. Daniel needed money fast and quietly. And the fastest, quietest money he could think of was his mother's house and his mother's savings. If only he could get himself named her power of attorney before anyone asked too many questions about her mental state. The home in Fairview wasn't about Eleanor's care at all. It was about clearing the house so it could be sold, and clearing Eleanor's judgment so nobody would ask why. Vanessa was in on it too. She'd been promised a share once the lawsuit was covered. The new medication wasn't medical. It was strategic. A paper trail of confusion built one prescription at a time, so that if anyone questioned Eleanor's competency later, there would be a doctor's note ready and waiting. This wasn't a husband being cold to his aging mother. This was fraud. Elder financial abuse, dressed up as a family decision at a dinner table, and I had almost missed it entirely because I was looking for an affair or cruelty, or the ordinary kind of betrayal these stories usually are. I wasn't looking for a felony. So when Ben said Mom's moving to a home, it's decided. I already knew every piece of what stood behind those words. I already had copies of the deed. I already had a recording of Vanessa on the phone, thinking she was speaking only to Daniel, saying, "Once it's sold, we split it before the lawsuit hits." I already had a name for a real elder law attorney of my own. I looked at my husband and I said it again, slower this time. "Let's talk about whose home that would be. Because it isn't yours, Daniel. It's mine. It has been for 6 years. And Eleanor isn't moving anywhere. Except maybe into a life where nobody is deciding things behind her back anymore." Nobody spoke. Ben looked, for the first time that night, uncertain, like a boy who'd repeated something without understanding its weight. Vanessa's face went the color of the tablecloth. I didn't scream. I didn't need to. I simply stood up, walked to the sideboard, and brought back the folder I'd already prepared, and set it down where the turkey had been and said, "We can discuss this like adults, or my attorney can discuss it with yours. Either way, Eleanor is staying exactly where she is." That Christmas didn't end with reconciliation. It ended with Daniel moving out within the month, with a lawsuit of his own eventually catching up to him regardless, and with Vanessa quietly disappearing from our lives the way people do when the money they were counting on evaporates. But Eleanor stayed. She's still in that house today, in the room she chose herself, drinking her coffee every morning without a single pill she doesn't need. And every Christmas since, when I set the table, I think about how quietly the worst things can be built, and how quietly, if you're patient enough, they can be taken apart again.